All right, let's just get right into it. This is a question that's, well, it's all over the internet, right? Is Donald Trump the Antichrist? It's the kind of headline that's designed to make you click, for sure. But for a lot of people, it's a genuinely serious question. So let's actually tackle it head on. But before we do that, you gotta understand something really important. This whole thing, it is not new, not by a long shot. I mean, it feels like every single generation points to someone and says, that's him. We saw it with Nero in ancient Rome, then Napoleon, then of course Hitler, and the list of modern leaders just keeps going. This is this recurring question that history just keeps asking about its most powerful and sometimes most terrifying figures. Okay, so let's not beat around the bush. If we're going strictly by the biblical texts, the quick answer is no. But, and this is a big but, just saying no kind of misses the whole point. The why behind that answer? Now that's where things get really interesting. And honestly, it's way more important.
So, why no? What's the reasoning? Well, it turns out there's an actual biblical test, a kind of checklist, that a figure has to meet to be the Antichrist. And that's exactly what we're going to break down right now.
All right, so first things first. To really get that why, we have to understand what the word Antichrist even means. Because you see, the Bible actually uses it in two totally different ways. One is about a general spirit or an idea, and the other is about one single specific person. So let's get a little nerdy for a second and look at the original Greek. The word is antichristos. Now, when we hear anti, our brain immediately goes to against, right? But the word has another meaning, in place of or instead of, and that changes everything. See, an antichrist isn't just someone fighting against Christ. It's someone trying to take his place. That is a massive difference, and it's the key to this whole thing. And this really shows you those two uses in action. On the one hand, the Apostle John says there are many antichrists already out there. He's talking about that general spirit, that pattern of anyone who denies who Jesus is. But then on the other hand, he talks about the Antichrist, a single, final person who's still to come, the one who will be the absolute final embodiment of all that rebellion.
So what's the difference? What makes that final guy the guy? What's the one thing that separates him from all the others? Well, it all comes down to one non-negotiable, absolute red line.
And here it is. This is the passage that lays it all out. From the Apostle Paul. He says this person literally takes his seat in the temple of God, proclaiming himself to be God. And you have to understand, this isn't presented as some kind of metaphor. It's described as a literal public act. He declares himself God. Okay, let that sink in for a second, because this is probably the most important point of this whole explainer. The ultimate crime, the thing that defines this figure. It's not being a political tyrant. It's not being a bad person or a dictator. It is theological usurpation. He doesn't just want your vote or your obedience. He wants your worship. He wants to be seen as God. So let's put this into a simple checklist, straight from the Bible. Number 1, he has global power, authority over pretty much everyone. Number 2, he makes war on believers, an active, open persecution. Number 3, he openly blasphemes God. But number 4, the final act, the one that no one in history has ever fully pulled off. He claims to be God and demands that everyone worship him.
Now, what's so fascinating is that when you look back through history, you see all these figures who've ticked some of these boxes. Maybe 1 or 2, maybe even 3, but never all 4. It's like history's full of dress rehearsals, but we haven't seen the main event yet.
And we have to remember, the people who first read this stuff, this wasn't just some abstract future thing for them. They were living it. They were in the Roman Empire, a system that already looked and felt a whole lot like this. Okay, let's look at a couple of examples. You've got the Roman emperors, like Nero. What did they do? They demanded worship. People were forced to declare Caesar is Lord. That's a pretty clear Antichrist-like action, right? It's a pattern. Then you fast forward to modern dictators. They demand total loyalty. They persecute believers. Another pattern. But look at that last column. Was it the final deal? Nope. The emperors came and went. And the dictators today, they just don't have that required global power. So yeah, these are the previews. They're the echoes, the patterns that show us what this kind of spirit looks like when it gets power. But again, they're the dress rehearsals. They are not the main event. So what's the point of all this? Why does this matter for us today? Well, The real takeaway here isn't about becoming some kind of prophetic detective trying to predict who the bad guy is. It's actually about something much closer to home: how we live our lives right now. And that brings us right back to our original question. When you take that biblical checklist and you hold it up against Donald Trump, or frankly, any modern politician, it just doesn't line up. That number one most important item, the claim to literally be God, it's missing. The global religious authority, not there. And a lot of other specific prophetic conditions just haven't been met. It's not even close. So, if the Bible's main warning isn't for us to be obsessively scanning the news for this one supervillain, then what is the real danger it's trying to warn us about? The answer is kind of surprising, and it points the finger in a very different direction. This right here is a huge shift in focus. Think about it. When the Apostle John was writing about antichrists, his most urgent concern wasn't the guy in charge in Rome. It was the false teachers and bad ideas that were cropping up inside the churches themselves. The Bible seems to spend way more time warning that this spirit of Antichrist, this deception, is a much more subtle and maybe even a much bigger threat within our communities than any politician could ever be on the outside.
And that leaves us with a final question. And it's not about them, it's about us. Maybe the whole point of these warnings isn't for us to get good at spotting a bad guy out there somewhere. Maybe the real challenge is for each of us to look in the mirror and ask, where is my ultimate loyalty? Is it to a political party? To a specific leader? To a country? Or is it to Christ? Because in the end, that's really the only question that matters.